The information provided in this video is for educational and entertainment purposes only and does not constitute professional career, legal, or financial advice. The U.S. tech industry and social media landscape are subject to rapid shifts in algorithms, labor market demands, and platform policies. While historical trends and case studies provide valuable insight, individual career outcomes vary based on experience, location, and market conditions. Viewers are strongly encouraged to conduct their own due diligence and consult with career counselors or industry professionals before making significant employment decisions. By the time you finish watching this video, the person sitting next to you will have scrolled through 36 feet of content on their smartphone. That is the height of a 3-story building, and it represents the average daily digital consumption of a single American adult. In the U.S. tech sector, your ability to capture a fraction of a second of that attention is the difference between a multi-billion-dollar IPO and a startup that quietly vanishes into the archives of Crunchbase. Most people think being a social media specialist means posting high-quality photos or knowing which song is trending on TikTok. That is the single most expensive mistake you can make. In reality, the top 1% of specialists in Silicon Valley, Austin, and New York City aren't even thinking about the content first. They are thinking about the data infrastructure, psychological triggers, and conversion funnels that drive the American economy. If you are still relying on chronological posting and manual engagement, you are not a specialist, you are a hobbyist. Today, we are closing the gap between being a casual user and becoming a high-impact architect of the digital attention economy. We are diving into the definitive masterclass on the specific, high-level technical and analytical skills required to break into the U.S. tech industry as a social media specialist. This isn't a surface-level overview of how to use Instagram. This is about the convergence of data science, consumer psychology, and brand strategy. We are solving the problem of the glass ceiling. Many creators and entry-level coordinators find themselves stuck at a certain salary bracket because they lack the technical vocabulary and strategic depth that U.S. tech giants like Meta, Google, and Salesforce demand. We are going to deconstruct the specialist title to reveal the actual machinery underneath, ensuring that by the end of this series, you possess the roadmap to transition from a content creator to a strategic asset. To understand the scale of this role, we must first look at the data literacy requirement. In the U.S. market, a social media specialist is essentially a data analyst with a creative flair. You are no longer looking at likes as a metric of success. Likes are a vanity metric. Instead, you are required to master the nuances of attribution modeling. This involves understanding how a single tweet or a LinkedIn post contributes to a final purchase 3 weeks later on a desktop computer. This is the first touch versus last touch debate that dominates marketing boardrooms from Seattle to Boston. A specialist must be able to navigate platforms like Google Analytics 4 and Adobe Experience Cloud to track a user's journey across multiple sessions. For example, if a user sees a sponsored video on their mobile device during their morning commute, later clicks an organic link on their laptop at work, and finally converts via an email remarketing campaign, the social media specialist must be able to quantify the exact value that the initial social touchpoint provided to that conversion path. This requires a deep understanding of UTM parameters, pixel tracking, and the challenges posed by recent privacy updates like iOS 14.5, which disrupted traditional tracking methods. Beyond the data, there is the skill of strategic content architecture. In the U.S. tech space, content is not created in a vacuum. It is built to serve a specific stage of the marketing funnel: awareness, consideration, or conversion. A specialist must know how to pivot their voice and technical execution based on these stages. For instance, at the top of the funnel, you are not selling a product, you are selling a problem. Case studies of successful SaaS companies show that their social media presence often focuses on thought leadership and industry friction rather than product features. You need to develop the skill of identifying white space in digital conversations. This involves using social listening tools like Sprout Social or BrandWatch to monitor millions of data points to see what your target audience is complaining about in real time. If you can identify a common frustration within the DevOps community on Reddit and translate that into a strategic video series on LinkedIn that addresses that specific pain point, you have moved from being a poster to being a strategist. Then there is the technical proficiency in platform-specific algorithms. This is where most people fail because they treat every platform the same. In the U.S. tech industry, a specialist knows that the LinkedIn algorithm prioritizes dwell time and meaningful comments, while the YouTube Shorts algorithm is heavily weighted toward swipe away rates and replay frequency. You must be able to perform a forensic analysis of why a piece of content failed. Was the hook too long? Did the metadata fail to categorize the video correctly for the intended audience? Did the engagement rate drop off because the call to action was too aggressive? This requires a mastery of A/B testing. In a professional setting, you are rarely posting one version of an ad or a post. You are running controlled experiments where you change one variable, perhaps the headline, the thumbnail, or the first 3 seconds of audio, to see which version yields a lower cost per acquisition. This scientific approach to creativity is what separates US tech specialists from the rest of the world. We also have to discuss the evolution of community management into community engineering. In the US, especially within the Web3, AI, and fintech sectors, a social media specialist is often the architect of a Discord or Slack community. This involves more than just answering questions. It requires the creation of brand advocacy programs, where you identify your most active users and empower them with exclusive access or information, effectively turning your audience into a decentralized marketing force. This requires high-level emotional intelligence combined with technical moderation skills. You are managing the reputation of a multi-million-dollar brand in real time. If a crisis breaks out, a server goes down, a security breach occurs, or a controversial statement is made, the specialist is the first line of defense. You must have a pre-approved crisis communication framework, ready to deploy at 3 a.m., understanding the legal and PR implications of every syllable you publish. Finally, we must touch upon the skill of cross-functional collaboration. In a US tech company, you do not work on an island. You are the bridge between the product team, the sales team, and the legal department. You need to be able to translate technical product updates into social-first language that doesn't violate SEC regulations if you are working in fintech, or HIPAA regulations if you are in medtech. This means you need a foundational understanding of the industry you are in. If you are a social media specialist for a cybersecurity firm, you need to understand the difference between a phishing attack and a ransomware attack. Without that industry-specific knowledge, your content will lack the authority needed to build trust with a high-value American audience. This part of the masterclass is about shifting your mindset from being a user of social media to being a commander of it. We are going to break down the technical stack, the psychological frameworks, and the career milestones you need to hit to reach the six-figure bracket in this competitive field. To move from a generalist to a commander in the 2026 US tech landscape, you must first master the transition from reactive reporting to predictive data architecture. Imagine a specialist named Jordan working at a high-growth artificial intelligence startup in Austin, Texas. In 2026, Jordan does not spend the morning checking how many likes a post received overnight. That is a legacy mindset. Instead, Jordan opens a custom dashboard that integrates the company's Snowflake data warehouse with real-time social signals via the Meta Conversions API and Google's latest enhanced conversions protocol. The first skill you must possess is advanced attribution modeling. You need to understand that in a complex B2B or high-ticket B2C tech environment, the customer journey is rarely linear. A potential lead might see a technical deep dive video on YouTube, interact with a sponsored post on LinkedIn 2 days later, and finally convert through a direct search a week after that. Historical trends in the US tech sector show that companies now prioritize specialists who can calculate the multi-touch attribution value of every social interaction. This means you must be proficient in SQL to query databases and use tools like Tableau or Power BI to visualize how social media touchpoints accelerate the sales cycle. If you cannot explain the delta between a first click and a linear attribution model to your chief marketing officer, you will struggle to justify the massive budgets required for tech scale growth. The second pillar of your technical arsenal is social search optimization, which has completely superseded traditional hashtagging in 2026. Case studies from major retail and tech transitions show that over 50% of the US Gen Z and Alpha populations now use social platforms as their primary search engines, bypassing Google entirely. As a specialist, you are now a social SEO architect. This involves a step-by-step process of keyword clustering, specifically for the TikTok and Instagram algorithms. You aren't just writing captions. You are embedding semantic keywords into every layer of the content. This includes the spoken word in the video, which is now indexed by AI-driven transcription bots, the on-screen text overlays, and the hidden alt text that describes the visual elements to the platform's ranking engine. To execute this at a professional level, you must use tools like SEMrush or Ahrefs to identify high-intent search queries within your niche, and then map those queries to your content calendar. For example, if you are representing a cloud security firm, you are looking for queries like how to prevent data breaches in multi-cloud environments. Your content must be the definitive answer to that query, structured in a way that the platform's crawler identifies your video as the most authoritative response. This level of technical SEO within a social context is what drives sustainable organic growth in an era where organic reach is notoriously difficult to maintain. Furthermore, we must address the integration of generative AI orchestration. In 2026, simply knowing how to use an AI chatbot is a baseline requirement, not a skill. To be a specialist in the US tech industry, you must be an orchestrator of agentic workflows. Imagine if Jordan, our specialist in Austin, needed to launch a global campaign across 6 different time zones and 4 different languages. Instead of manually editing assets, Jordan manages a suite of AI agents that are trained on the company's specific brand voice, legal compliance guidelines, and historical performance data. This is a skill of prompt engineering and workflow automation. You need to be able to build a pipeline where a single long-form video is automatically dissected into 25 high-performing short-form clips, each optimized for the specific nuances of the platform it is destined for. This involves using Python or low-code automation tools like Zapier and Make to connect your content creation suite to your distribution platforms. You are essentially building a content factory that operates with 20% human oversight and 80% machine efficiency. Historical trends suggest that the specialists who embrace this role as a system designer, rather than a content creator, are the ones moving into director-level positions. They are not threatened by AI, they are the ones holding the keys to the models. We also have to dive deep into the world of paid social engineering and signal management. The US tech industry is built on scale, and scale is almost always fueled by paid media. In 2026, the traditional way of setting up ads through a simple web interface is dead for high-level professionals. You must understand the technicalities of server-side tracking and the Conversions API or CAPI. Since the privacy shifts of the early 2020s, browser-based cookies are no longer reliable. A top-tier social media specialist works closely with the engineering team to ensure that conversion data is sent directly from the company's server to the social platform's server. This creates a much more accurate feedback loop for the platform's machine learning bidding algorithms. You need to understand the math behind the bid cap and the cost cap strategies. For instance, if you are running a campaign for a new fintech app, you need to know exactly how much you can afford to pay for a lead versus a qualified sign-up, accounting for the projected lifetime value of that user. This requires a grasp of unit economics that most creative-minded social managers lack. You are managing a portfolio of digital assets, and your goal is to optimize the return on ad spend while maintaining a healthy customer acquisition cost. Step by step, this involves setting up A/B tests that are statistically significant, meaning you aren't just guessing which ad is better. You are using a 95% confidence interval to prove it. Beyond the hard technical skills, there is the requirement for psychological architecture. This is the ability to design content that triggers specific neurochemical responses in the American consumer. In a highly competitive tech market, attention is the scarcest resource. You must understand the concepts of pattern interruption and the Zeigarnik effect. Pattern interruption is the technical art of breaking the user's scrolling trance within the first 400 milliseconds. This could be a specific color contrast, a jarring camera movement, or a controversial visual statement that forces the brain to stop and process the information. The Zeigarnik effect is the psychological tendency to remember uncompleted tasks or interrupted stories better than completed ones. A specialist uses this by creating open loops in their content, such as a multi-part series where each video ends with an unresolved tension that can only be satisfied by watching the next installment or visiting the website. This isn't just storytelling. It is the strategic application of cognitive psychology to maximize retention metrics. In 2026, the platforms reward retention above all else. If you can keep a user on the platform because of your content, the algorithm will reward you with lower costs and higher visibility. To round out this part of the masterclass, you must also be proficient in crisis simulation and brand safety. In the US tech sector, one viral mistake can wipe out millions in market cap. You must be skilled in using sentiment analysis tools that use natural language processing to detect shifts in public perception before they reach a boiling point. This means setting up automated alerts for specific keywords and phrases that might indicate a brewing controversy. You are the digital bodyguard of the brand. This involves a proactive approach where you create a response matrix that outlines exactly who needs to be contacted and what the tone of the response should be for various scenarios, from a minor technical glitch to a major ethical debate. This level of preparedness is what distinguishes a junior coordinator from a senior specialist who is trusted with the keys to a global brand's reputation. But even with all this technical and psychological mastery, there is one critical area that most specialists overlook, and it is the very thing that determines whether your career stagnates at the mid-level or skyrockets to the executive suite. It is the ability to quantify the unquantifiable. Brand equity in a fragmented digital world. How do you prove to a room full of skeptical software engineers and finance directors that a viral trend actually moved the needle on the company's long-term value? In the next part, we are going to pull back the curtain on the most guarded secret in the tech industry. The social-to-sales attribution loop that only the top 0.1% of marketers know how to build. We will look at how to leverage the upcoming 2027 privacy regulations to your advantage, and the specific software stack that is currently being beta tested by the giants in Silicon Valley to track offline behavior from online signals. If you think you understand how the algorithm works now, wait until you see how it is being reprogrammed for the next decade. To understand how the top tier of US tech companies will operate in 2027, you must first master the concept of marketing mix modeling, or MMM. In 2026, the industry has largely moved away from the simple click tracking of the previous decade. Imagine a specialist named Sarah working for a major hardware developer in Palo Alto. Sarah is launching a new augmented reality headset. She knows that a user might see a high-production trailer on YouTube, browse a technical thread on Reddit, and see 3 different influencer reviews on TikTok before finally walking into a physical retail store in Chicago to make the purchase. Historically, that social media effort would be invisible at the point of sale. However, in the 2026 tech environment, Sarah uses probabilistic modeling to determine the incrementality of her campaigns. This is the skill of proving that social media wasn't just a bystander, but the primary driver of the revenue. You do this by running lift studies. This involves a step-by-step process where you isolate a specific geographic market, such as the Seattle metropolitan area, and completely turn off social ads for 2 weeks while keeping them active in a control market like Denver. By comparing the baseline sales in both regions, you can calculate the true conversion lift provided by social signals. This data-heavy approach is the only language that the chief financial officers of 2026 speak. As we look toward the 2027 privacy landscape, the U.S. tech industry is preparing for the total deprecation of third-party identifiers across all platforms. As a social media specialist, your most valuable skill will be the collection and orchestration of zero-party data. This is data that a customer intentionally and proactively shares with the brand. Imagine if Sarah, instead of just running a standard ad, creates an interactive configuration tool on Instagram where users can select their preferred hardware specs or design features. Each selection is a data point that is pushed directly into the company's customer data platform, or CDP. You are no longer guessing what the audience wants based on their browsing history. You are building a proprietary database of their explicit preferences. This requires a technical understanding of API integrations. You need to know how to connect social lead generation forms to a CRM like Salesforce or HubSpot using webhooks. In the 2026 job market, if you can demonstrate that you built a social-to-CRM pipeline that increased a company's first-party data assets by 30%, your value to the organization becomes astronomical. The reprogramming of the algorithm for the next decade is centered on the shift from social graphs to interest graphs, powered by edge computing. In 2026, your content is not being served to people because they follow you. It is being served because an AI model has predicted their next micro-need within milliseconds. This brings us to the skill of signal management. A specialist must now understand how to feed the machine. For instance, when Sarah uploads a video to a tech platform, she isn't just uploading a file. She is uploading a bundle of signals. This includes high-fidelity metadata, custom-trained captions that use the specific nomenclature of the 2026 tech scene, and specific audio triggers that the algorithm uses to categorize content. Case studies from early 2026 show that brands that optimize for these non-visual signals saw a 40% increase in initial discovery rates. You must learn to think like the machine. This involves analyzing the video intelligence API outputs of your own content to see how Google or Meta's AI perceives your brand. If the AI thinks your luxury tech video is about discount electronics because of the color grading or background noise, your campaign is doomed before it even starts. Let's dive into the technical stack of online to offline, or O2O tracking. This is the bridge between a digital impression and a physical action. In 2026, the US tech industry uses sophisticated wallet pass integration. Imagine a scenario where a user sees a social post for a software-as-a-service pop-up event in New York City. The specialist includes a link to add an event pass to the user's Apple or Google Wallet. This pass contains a unique identifier. When that user walks past the physical event location, geofencing triggers a notification on their phone. If they enter and scan the pass, the social media specialist now has a closed-loop attribution point. You have tracked a human being from a digital scroll to a physical footfall, mastering the deployment of these digital passes and the back-end analytics that follow them is a requirement for anyone working in the high-stakes world of US tech product launches. Furthermore, we must address the skill of full-funnel content liquidity. In the past, you might have created one video for one platform. In 2026, that is a waste of resources. A specialist must be able to architect a content ecosystem where a single core asset is atomized into dozens of high-performing variants. This is not just about resizing a video, it is about technical adaptation. For example, a 10-minute technical keynote is recorded. The specialist uses AI-driven tools to extract the most emotionally resonant 15-second segments for TikTok, the most data-dense quotes for LinkedIn, and the most visually striking frames for Instagram. Each of these assets must have its own unique tracking URL to feed back into the marketing mix model we discussed earlier. You are managing a fluid stream of assets that are constantly being re-evaluated by the algorithm. If a specific variant starts to see a drop in retention, the specialist must be able to swap it out in real time. This requires a level of agility and technical proficiency in creative automation tools that was previously only found in high-end ad agencies. Consider the case of a fintech company in 2026 navigating a sudden market shift. The social media specialist isn't just posting updates, they are monitoring the real-time sentiment index. This is a skill involving the use of natural language processing or NLP models to scan millions of social mentions, news headlines, and even legislative filings. By identifying a 5% shift toward negative sentiment regarding a specific financial product, the specialist can preemptively adjust the content strategy, pivoting from aggressive sales to educational reassurance before the PR department even realizes there is a problem. You are essentially a digital actuary, calculating the risk and reward of every post in the context of the global information flow. This leads us to the critical intersection of social media and cybersecurity. In 2026, the US tech sector is plagued by sophisticated deepfakes and brand impersonation attacks. A specialist must possess the technical skill of digital asset verification. This involves using blockchain-based watermarking or content authenticity initiative protocols to prove that your brand's content is genuine. You need to know how to monitor for rogue accounts using your brand's IP, and how to execute takedown requests through the appropriate legal and platform-specific channels. This is no longer just a legal issue, it is a social media management issue. If a deepfake of your CEO goes viral on X or Threads, you are the one who must manage the fallout in the comments and ensure the truth reaches the algorithm faster than the lie. The depth of this role is expanding every day, and the technical requirements are becoming more rigorous. But there is a specific, often misunderstood element that determines the actual conversion rate of all these technical systems. It is the bridge between the machine-learned algorithm and the human limbic system. Even the most perfectly attributed, signal-optimized, and privacy-compliant campaign will fail if it doesn't solve for the paradox of choice in the 2026 digital marketplace. In the next part, we are going to break down the neurocopywriting frameworks that the top 0.1% of US specialists use to bypass the logical brain of the consumer. We will look at why 99% of call to actions are failing in the 2026 tech economy, and the specific three-word linguistic triggers that are currently driving record-breaking engagement for the giants of Silicon Valley. We will also examine the secret influence of the invisible influencer economy, where brands are building entire social strategies around people who don't even have public profiles. If you thought you knew how to write a caption, wait until you see the data on how the human eye actually tracks text on a 2026 mobile interface. To master the 2026 mobile interface, you must first understand that the human eye no longer follows the traditional F pattern of the early 2000s or even the Z pattern of the 2010s. Biometric research from leading US consumer labs shows that by 2026, the average user has developed a digital tunnel vision, known as algorithmic blindness. As a social media specialist, your first technical skill in neurocopywriting is the construction of anchor points. Imagine Marcus, a specialist working for a high-frequency trading platform in Chicago. Marcus knows that when a user scrolls through a vertical feed, their eyes aren't looking for information. They are looking for reasons to stop. eye tracking data reveals that users in 2026 prioritize 3 specific areas: the center left for text recognition, the bottom third for interactive elements, and the top right for brand verification. To bypass the logical brain, Marcus uses a linguistic framework called cognitive ease. This is the practice of making information so simple to process that the brain accepts it as true without scrutiny. In the tech industry, where products are inherently complex, the specialist's job is to strip away the technical friction. Step by step, this involves the 3-2-1 copywriting protocol. You lead with 3 words of high-velocity tension, followed by 2 lines of contextual grounding, and end with 1 clear, frictionless directive. For example, instead of a caption that reads, "We are excited to announce our new scalable cloud architecture, which helps developers deploy faster," Marcus writes, "Deployment bottlenecks ended. Our new architecture removes the 400 millisecond lag in your CI/CD pipeline. Audit your stack here." Historical trends in the US tech sector indicate that this low-friction approach results in a significantly higher click-through rate because it addresses the limbic system's desire for immediate problem resolution rather than the prefrontal cortex's need for long-form analysis. This leads us to the paradox of choice, a psychological phenomenon that is currently paralyzing the 2026 digital consumer. In an era of infinite content, providing too many options or too much information leads to zero action. The top 0.1% of specialists use a technique called choice architecture. They don't ask the user to sign up, read a blog, and watch a demo. They use a single-threaded conversion path. Imagine if Marcus is running a LinkedIn campaign for a new cybersecurity protocol. He doesn't offer a white paper and a webinar. He offers one specific diagnostic tool. By narrowing the focus, he reduces the cognitive load on the user. Case studies from 2025 and 2026 show that tech brands using single-option call to actions saw a 22% increase in conversion stability compared to those using multi-choice menus. You are not just a writer. You are a digital navigator, leading the user through a narrow corridor of intent. The secret influence of the invisible influencer economy is perhaps the most significant shift in the 2026 US tech industry. For years, brands focused on public-facing creators with millions of followers. However, the data now shows that high-value tech decisions are rarely influenced by public posts. Instead, they are driven by dark social, private channels like Slack, Discord, and encrypted messaging apps. An invisible influencer is someone like an anonymous lead engineer at a Fortune 500 company or a high-reputation contributor on a private GitHub repository. These individuals don't have public profiles, but their word is law within their niche. To tap into this, a social media specialist must master the skill of dark social orchestration. This involves creating shareable assets that are specifically designed for private circulation. These are not flashy ads. They are high-utility snippets of code, exclusive data visualizations, or internal-only white papers that look and feel like leaked or privileged information. Imagine Marcus creates a highly detailed, non-branded infographic about the upcoming shifts in federal data privacy laws for 2027. He doesn't post it with a big logo. He posts it in a way that encourages a senior executive to copy the link and paste it into their internal company Slack. When that link is shared, Marcus uses specialized tracking software that identifies the source of the traffic as a private referral. Historical trends suggest that traffic coming from dark social has a 400% higher conversion rate than traffic from public feeds because it carries the weight of a trusted, private recommendation. Furthermore, we must analyze the linguistic triggers currently dominating the 2026 tech economy. The language of 2026 is centered on 3 pillars: autonomy, sovereignty, and resilience. As the US market moves toward decentralized systems and AI-integrated workflows, users are looking for tools that give them more control, not less. A specialist must replace passive language with sovereign verbs. Instead of saying our tool allows you to manage your data, you say reclaim your data sovereignty. This isn't just wordplay. It is a technical alignment with the current psychological state of the American tech worker. You must perform a step-by-step audit of your brand's vocabulary. Are you using words that imply a loss of control? Or are you using words that empower the user as the ultimate authority? Another critical skill is the integration of biometric copywriting. In 2026, high-end social media management tools can actually predict the heart rate variability and pupillary response of a target demographic based on the visual and textual composition of a post. While this sounds like science fiction, it is grounded in the analysis of millions of previous interactions. A specialist must be able to interpret these heat maps. For instance, if the data shows that users' eyes are jumping over your headline because the font weight is too light or the opening word is a low-energy preposition like with or for, you must have the technical agility to rewrite that headline in real time. You are looking for peak arousal moments. In the context of a B2B tech post, peak arousal isn't about excitement. It is about the sudden realization of a solution to a persistent pain point. Consider a case study of a Silicon Valley SaaS firm that struggled with a 0.5% engagement rate on their technical updates. By applying these neurocopywriting frameworks, specifically focusing on the linguistic triggers of systemic failure and recovery, the specialist was able to shift the narrative from a product update to a critical industry intervention. They stopped talking about features and started talking about the cost of inaction. In the US tech industry, the fear of falling behind the technological curve is a more powerful motivator than the hope of moving forward. As a specialist, you must know how to ethically leverage this loss aversion without crossing into fear-mongering, which is why the tone must always remain educational and authoritative. But even with the most advanced copywriting and an understanding of the invisible influencer network, there is a technical barrier that is stopping 90% of specialists from ever reaching the executive level. It is the inability to speak the language of the developers who build the products you are trying to sell. There is a specific technical literacy required to market to the people who build the future, and if you get a single term wrong, you lose all credibility instantly. In the next part, we are going to dive into the developer relations or DevRel crossover. We will examine the specific technical vocabulary you must master to win over the most skeptical audience in the world: US software engineers. We will look at how to navigate the 2026 landscape of open-source social media and the specific platforms that are replacing the traditional giants for technical discourse. If you think LinkedIn is the only place for B2B tech, you are missing the most active and influential hubs of the US digital economy. We are about to go where the builders live. To thrive where the builders live, you must first acknowledge that software engineers are the most difficult audience in the US tech industry to influence. In 2026, the standard marketing playbook is not just ineffective, it is often viewed as a direct insult to the intelligence of a technical audience. Imagine a specialist named Alex who has just been hired by a high-performance database startup in San Francisco called CoreFlow. Alex's task is to grow the brand's presence among back-end engineers and DevOps professionals. If Alex posts a generic stock photo of a person typing on a glowing laptop with a caption about digital transformation, the engagement will be zero. In fact, historical trends suggest that such content often leads to negative brand sentiment in communities like Hacker News or specialized subreddits. The first skill Alex must master is technical vocabulary and contextual accuracy. In the 2026 tech economy, a social media specialist must be able to distinguish between a monolithic architecture and microservices, or explain the difference between horizontal and vertical scaling without sounding like they are reading from a Wikipedia entry. This is not about being a coder, it is about being technically literate. For example, if Alex is promoting a new API, the content should focus on specific metrics that developers care about: latency, throughput, and ease of integration. Instead of saying our API is fast, Alex writes our new endpoint reduces P99 latency by 150 milliseconds for multi-region deployments. This level of specificity signals to the audience that the person behind the account actually understands the product and the pain points of the user. Step by step, Alex performs a technical audit on every piece of content before it goes live. This involves 3 layers of verification. First is the nomenclature check. Are we using the latest industry terms? For instance, in 2026, we are no longer just talking about AI. We are talking about LLM orchestration and retrieval augmented generation. Second is the environment check. Does the code snippet shown in the graphic actually run? There is nothing that ruins a tech brand's credibility faster than a social media post showing syntactically incorrect code. Third is the utility check. Does this post solve a problem or provide a new perspective? Or is it just noise? Case studies from successful infrastructure companies like Versal and HashiCorp show that their most viral posts are often simple, high-utility code snippets or terminal commands that solve a very specific, common frustration. Moving beyond traditional platforms, Alex must dive into GitHub as a social media signal. In 2026, a brand's GitHub repository is its most honest social profile. A social media specialist in the tech sector needs to understand how to leverage GitHub stars and forks as social proof. You are not just managing a Twitter account, you are managing the perception of an open source project. This involves the skill of community documentation. Alex works with the engineering team to ensure that the README file is not just a technical document, but a high-conversion landing page. You are looking at the conversion rate from a repository visit to a star. Historical trends indicate that repositories with clear, visually engaging GIFs demonstrating the software in action see a 60% higher star attention rate. This is social media management in its most raw technical form. We also have to discuss the rise of decentralized social protocols like Farcaster and Lens, which by 2026 have become the primary hubs for high-level technical discourse in the US. These platforms are built on blockchain technology, meaning the users own their data and their social graph. For a specialist like Alex, this requires a shift from platform-centric thinking to protocol-centric thinking. On Farcaster, for instance, the community is organized into channels that are highly moderated by the users themselves. To succeed here, you cannot use automated scheduling tools or bot-driven engagement. You must participate as a human. This is the skill of protocol-native engagement. It means understanding the specific culture of each channel, the inside jokes of the developer community, and the technical debates currently trending in the ecosystem. Imagine if Alex spends 30 minutes every morning contributing to a thread about Rust versus Go for systems programming. By providing a thoughtful, non-promotional perspective, Alex builds the brand's reputation as a peer in the space. When Alex eventually does share a CoreFlow update, the community is receptive because Alex has already deposited value into the social bank. Furthermore, we must address the skill of developer experience or DX as a social metric. In 2026, the social media specialist is often the first point of contact for a developer's journey. This means you must be proficient in managing Discord and Slack communities. These are not just chat rooms. They are the heart of your brand's ecosystem. A specialist must be able to set up automated workflows that alert the engineering team when a high-priority bug is mentioned in a public channel, or when a user provides a brilliant suggestion for a new feature. You are the filter between the chaos of the community and the focus of the product team. This requires a high degree of technical empathy. You need to understand the frustration of a developer who has been stuck on a deployment error for 6 hours. Your response shouldn't be "please open a ticket." It should be "are you seeing a 403 error on the edge function? Try adjusting your environment variables in the dashboard." This level of direct, technical support within a social context is what builds a cult following for a tech brand. Another critical element is the mastery of social video for developers. In 2026, we have seen a massive shift toward short-form technical tutorials. Imagine if Alex produces a 60-second video for TikTok or YouTube Shorts that demonstrates how to deploy a global database in under 3 minutes. This is not a flashy commercial. It is a screen recording with a voiceover, often referred to as a devlog. To do this well, you need to understand the technical stack you are demonstrating. You need to know how to use a CLI, how to navigate a cloud console, and how to edit the video so that it moves at the speed of a developer's thought process. This is the skill of compressed technical storytelling. You are stripping away all the fluff and showing the magic moment of the product as quickly as possible. Data from 2025 shows that these no-fluff technical videos have a 300% higher save rate among engineers compared to high-production brand films. As we look at the broader US tech landscape, we must also consider the role of the social media specialist in open-source sustainability. Many tech companies in 2026 are built on top of open-source projects. A specialist must know how to navigate the delicate politics of these communities. You are not the owner. You are a contributor. This requires a skill set in digital diplomacy. You must be able to promote your company's contributions to the project without making it seem like a corporate takeover. This involves highlighting the work of independent contributors, sponsoring community events, and ensuring that the social narrative remains focused on the health of the project, rather than just the profit of the company. The transition from a general social media role to a technical specialist in the US tech industry is a journey from the surface to the core. You are moving from the world of what to the world of how. You are no longer just telling people that a product exists. You are showing them how it works, why it matters, and how it fits into their existing technical workflow. This requires a level of intellectual curiosity that goes far beyond the average marketing role. You have to be willing to read white papers, attend developer conferences, and spend your weekends playing with the very tools you are paid to promote. But there is one final technical hurdle that even the most tech-savvy specialists often underestimate. It is the ability to bridge the gap between this high-level technical engagement and the hard-nosed requirements of the sales department. How do you turn a GitHub star or a Farcaster comment into $1 million enterprise contract? How do you prove that Alex's hour spent debating Rust versus Go actually contributed to the company's bottom line? In the next part, we are going to explore the social to sales engineering pipeline. We will look at how the top US tech firms are using social intent data to identify enterprise-level buyers before they even fill out a contact form. We will dive into the specific software that tracks the anonymous behavior of companies on your social channels and how to feed that data to your sales team without being intrusive. If you thought social media was just for brand awareness, you are about to see how it has become the most powerful lead generation engine in the 2026 tech economy. The transition from social engagement to a hard revenue pipeline is where most specialists lose their seat at the executive table. In the 2026 US tech economy, the concept of social media as a top-of-funnel awareness tool has been replaced by the social to sales engineering pipeline. This is a highly technical infrastructure that treats every social interaction as a data point in a larger account-based marketing or ABM strategy. To understand this, we must look at the work of Chloe, a senior social media specialist at a Denver-based cybersecurity firm called Sentinel Cloud. Chloe does not report on reach or impressions. Instead, she reports on pipeline contribution value. Her job is to identify high-value enterprise accounts long before they ever fill out a request for a demo on the company website. The first skill you must master to build this pipeline is the identification and categorization of social intent signals. In 2026, social platforms are flooded with noise, but for a B2B tech firm, certain behaviors are statistically significant indicators of a future purchase. Historical trends suggest that when multiple employees from the same organization interact with a specific technical content cluster within a 72-hour window, the probability of that account being in a buying cycle increases by over 400%. Chloe uses a technique called account-based networking. Step by step, this involves mapping out the buying committee of her target accounts, which in US tech usually consists of 6 to 10 individuals, including the Chief Information Security Officer, the Head of DevOps, and the VP of Engineering. She then uses advanced social listening and de-anonymization software to track when these specific personas are engaging with Sentinel Cloud's content, or even the content of their direct competitors. This brings us to the core of the 2026 technical stack: social de-anonymization. Most people think that if an anonymous user views a LinkedIn post or a YouTube video, that data is lost. However, Chloe integrates the LinkedIn Insight tag and specialized API-driven intent providers like 6 Sense or Demandbase into her workflow. These tools use a combination of IP-to-company mapping and historical behavior data to strip away the mask of anonymity. Imagine if Chloe sees that an anonymous visitor from a major US financial institution spent 4 minutes reading a technical carousel about quantum-resistant encryption. In 2026, that is not just a view. It is a high-value interaction, or HVI. Chloe's system automatically triggers a lead scoring update in the company's Salesforce CRM. If that same company shows 3 more HVIs across different employees, the account is flagged as hot intent. The next critical skill is operationalizing social data for the sales team. A specialist in the US tech industry must act as the bridge between the digital feed and the sales development representative, or SDR. Historically, sales teams have hated social media leads because they were perceived as low quality. To solve this, Chloe has built a social to SDR handoff protocol. When an account hits a certain intent threshold, her system generates a social context brief. This brief doesn't just say the company is interested. It provides a detailed map of what they care about. It might show that the engineering team is focused on latency issues, while the C-suite is concerned with compliance frameworks. This allows the SDR to reach out with a hyper-personalized message that feels like a continuation of a conversation, rather than a cold call. Potential outcomes of this level of alignment include a 30% reduction in the sales cycle length and a significantly higher win rate on enterprise contracts. To achieve this at scale, you must master the skill of trigger-based content sequencing. In 2026, we no longer use generic drip campaigns. Instead, we use dynamic content paths that react to the user's behavior in real time. Imagine a scenario where a lead from a target account watches the first 30 seconds of a technical demo on YouTube, but drops off when the video enters a deep dive into API documentation. Chloe's system recognizes this drop-off and within hours, serves that specific user a shorter, more high-level executive summary of that same documentation on their LinkedIn feed. This is not manual work. It is the result of setting up complex logic gates within the social ad manager and the company's marketing automation platform. You are essentially building a self-correcting narrative that follows the prospect across the internet, subtly nudging them back into the conversion path based on their specific friction points. Furthermore, a specialist must understand the linguistic engineering of sales conversion. In the US tech market, there is a massive difference between a marketing-qualified click and a sales-ready interaction. Chloe uses a framework called progressive technical profiling. Every piece of content she produces is designed to ask a silent question. A video about cost optimization appeals to the economic buyer, while a post about container orchestration appeals to the technical gatekeeper. By tracking which employees interact with which type of content, Chloe can map out the internal power structure of the target company. She is essentially performing digital reconnaissance. Case studies from 2025 indicate that tech firms using this method were able to identify the internal champion of a deal 50% faster than those relying on traditional outreach. We also have to address the privacy-first data architecture of 2026. With the 2027 regulations looming, the ability to collect this data ethically is a high-demand skill. You must be proficient in setting up first-party data captures that are fully compliant with CCPA and GDPR. This involves the technical setup of consent management platforms that sync directly with your social pixels. Chloe ensures that every intent signal collected is tied to a clear value exchange. For example, a user might exchange their corporate email for access to a social exclusive benchmark report. This turns a third-party signal into first-party data, which is the gold standard of 2026 marketing. You are moving away from the creepy tracking of the past and toward a transparent, value-driven relationship with the prospect. The depth of the social-to-sales pipeline is what separates the high earners in the US tech industry from the rest. You are no longer just a social media person. You are a revenue architect. You are responsible for the most efficient lead generation engine in the company. You are the one who tells the sales team who to call, when to call them, and exactly what to say when they pick up the phone. This requires a mastery of data, a deep understanding of the sales process, and the technical ability to connect disparate software systems into a single, unified machine. But as powerful as this pipeline is, it relies on one final volatile variable: the human element of the brand. In an era of AI-driven automation and hyper-targeted data, the US audience is becoming increasingly cynical. They can smell a bot-driven funnel from a mile away. If your brand doesn't have a soul or a voice that feels authentic, all the technical infrastructure in the world won't save your conversion rate. The most successful specialists in 2026 are those who can balance this extreme technicality with a high level of human-centric brand strategy. In the next part, we are going to explore the executive personal brand loop. We will look at why the CEO's social media presence is now more valuable than the company's main page, and how to ghostwrite for high-level tech executives without losing their unique perspective. We will dive into the specific authority-building frameworks that turn a founder into a category-defining thought leader in the US market. If you think managing a brand account is hard, wait until you have to manage the digital identity of a Silicon Valley visionary, whose every word can move the needle on a company's valuation. In the US tech industry of 2026, the corporate logo is increasingly becoming a background element, while the individual faces behind the technology have moved to the foreground. This shift is driven by a fundamental change in consumer trust. Historical trends show that by 2026, the average American professional is 10 times more likely to engage with a post from a person than from a company page. As a social media specialist, your most high-stakes responsibility is no longer managing the brand account. It is architecting the executive personal brand loop. This brings us to the critical skill of risk mitigation and regulatory compliance. Managing the social media of a tech executive in the US involves navigating a minefield of SEC regulations and legal sensitivities. In 2026, a single misinformed post about a company's financial health or a potential merger can lead to devastating legal consequences and a loss of market valuation. David must be proficient in the specific language allowed by the SEC for public disclosures. He works in lockstep with the legal department, but he also acts as their translator. When the legal team says a post is too risky, David doesn't just delete it. He rewrites it in a way that satisfies the regulatory requirements while still maintaining the punchy, social-first tone needed for the US market. Case studies of major tech firms in 2025 show that those who failed to have a specialist-level filter on their executive accounts faced millions in fines and massive PR crises. Furthermore, David must understand the concept of the executive social funnel. This is the process of turning Elena's personal influence into tangible assets for the company. This is where the executive personal brand loop closes. When Elena posts a thought-provoking piece on LinkedIn about the ethical implications of AI, David ensures that the post includes a subtle, high-value call to action. Perhaps it is an invitation to join her private newsletter, or a link to a high-level research paper hosted on the company's site. By tracking these interactions, David can show the board of directors exactly how much revenue and how many strategic partnerships were initiated through Elena's personal social presence. Potential outcomes of a well-executed executive social funnel include a 40% lower cost per lead compared to traditional paid advertising and a significantly higher brand affinity among target accounts. Imagine if Elena's startup was competing for a major federal contract. The decision-makers at the Department of Energy are not just looking at the technical specs of the quantum computer. They are looking at the leadership of the company. They see Elena's consistent, authoritative presence on social media. They see her debating technical points with other experts and sharing her vision for the future of U.S. energy security. This creates a halo effect that makes the entire company seem more stable, more innovative, and more trustworthy. In the 2026 tech sector, the CEO is the ultimate marketing asset, and the social media specialist is the one who optimizes that asset for the digital age. To round out this mastery, David must also be adept at multimedia orchestration for the executive. In 2026, a text post is no longer enough. Elena needs to appear in high-fidelity video snippets, host live Q&A sessions on platforms like X or LinkedIn, and perhaps even appear as an AI-rendered avatar in virtual industry summits. David manages the production of these assets. He knows that a 30-second vertical video of Elena, explaining a complex concept, while walking to her office in Seattle will perform better than a 5-minute studio interview. He understands the technical requirements of lighting, sound, and framing that make an executive look professional yet accessible on a mobile screen. This level of responsibility requires a specialist who is part PR strategist, part journalist, and part data analyst. You are the architect of a public identity that can influence markets, attract top-tier talent, and close enterprise deals. But as you build this high-level authority, you will encounter a new set of challenges that arise as the brand scales. When a CEO becomes a public figure, the scale of the conversation becomes global and chaotic. How do you maintain control of the narrative when your content starts moving into territories and languages you don't even speak? How do you scale this personal touch without it becoming a mechanical process? In the next part, we are going to dive into the global scale and localization strategies for US tech brands. We will look at how to take a Silicon Valley narrative and make it resonate in the emerging tech hubs of Southeast Asia, Europe, and South America without losing the core identity. We will examine the specific tools for AI-driven real-time translation and the cultural nuances that can make or break a global tech launch in 2026. If you think you understand localization, wait until you see how the top 1% are using decentralized community managers to own the conversation in every corner of the world. To understand the magnitude of global scaling in 2026, we have to look at the death of the global feed. For the last decade, U.S. tech companies operated under the assumption that a single high-quality English language account could serve as a lighthouse for the entire world. In 2026, that strategy is a relic. Algorithmic regionalization has become so sophisticated that content not tailored to the specific cultural and linguistic nuances of a region is effectively invisible to local discovery engines. Imagine a specialist named Taylor working for a high-growth edge computing firm in Seattle called Velogate. Taylor is tasked with launching Velogate's new developer suite across 3 distinct markets: Tokyo, Berlin, and Sao Paulo. If Taylor simply translates the US marketing copy, the potential outcomes are catastrophic. In Japan, the technical community prizes long-form, high-context documentation and extreme humility in brand voice. In Brazil, the tech scene thrives on high-energy, visual-first storytelling and community-driven social proof. The first technical skill Taylor must master is transcreation via neural style transfer. In 2026, we are no longer just translating words. We are translating the soul of the content. This involves a step-by-step process of using specialized AI models that go beyond large language models. Taylor uses a tool stack that includes neural lip syncing and dialect adaptation. When Velogate's CTO records a video in Seattle, Taylor doesn't just add subtitles for the German market. She uses a high-fidelity video-to-video model that adjusts the CTO's mouth movements to match a perfectly localized German technical vocabulary, while maintaining the CTO's actual voice and emotional cadence. This creates a level of cognitive resonance that was impossible 2 years ago. Historical trends in the U.S. tech sector show that brands using this seamless localization see a 250% increase in viewer retention in non-English speaking markets. Beyond the visuals, Taylor must execute a cultural nuance audit. This is a skill of high-level sociolinguistics. For the Berlin launch, Taylor knows she must navigate the 2026 digital sovereignty laws. The German audience in 2026 is hypersensitive to data privacy and corporate overreach. Her social strategy there must lead with transparency. Every post in the DACH region, Germany, Austria, Switzerland, must include a verifiable link to the company's open-source privacy protocols, hosted on a decentralized ledger. In contrast, for the Tokyo launch, Taylor focuses on the high-context communication framework. This means the social graphics aren't minimal and sleek like the US versions. They are information-dense, featuring mascot-driven tutorials and detailed technical specifications embedded directly into the carousel. If Taylor applies the US, less is more philosophy to the Japanese market, the audience perceives it as a lack of technical depth. The second pillar of global scaling is the decentralized community node model. In 2026, the top 1% of US specialists are no longer managing one big Discord or one big X account. They are managing a network of autonomous nodes. Taylor's role is to act as the global orchestrator. She identifies local tech influencers and community leaders in each region, people who are already respected in the local DevOps or cloud infrastructure circles. Instead of paying them for a one-off post, she empowers them to run their own localized Velogate nodes. This is a skill of community architecture. Taylor provides the technical assets, the brand guidelines, and the real-time data feeds, but the local leaders have the autonomy to adapt the message. This decentralized approach solves the problem of cultural tone deafness. When a local controversy or a regional tech trend emerges, the node leader can react in real time, in the local language with the local slang, before Taylor in Seattle even wakes up. Step by step, this involves a governance framework. Taylor must create a set of logic gates for these local nodes. For example, if a node leader in Sao Paulo wants to run a localized contest, Taylor's framework provides the legal compliance check and the budget allocation automatically via a smart contract. This allows for massive scale without the bottleneck of a central approval process. Case studies from the 2025 global expansion of firms like Stripe and Snowflake indicate that this global model, global brand, local execution, is the only way to maintain a high-velocity growth rate in fragmented international markets. We also have to discuss the skill of real-time global sentiment mapping. In 2026, a social media specialist must be able to monitor the global information flow across multiple alphabets and platforms. Taylor uses a technical stack that performs cross-platform sentiment analysis in over 100 languages. If there is a sudden spike in negative sentiment regarding cloud latency in Southeast Asia, Taylor doesn't wait for a weekly report. Her dashboard flags the anomaly immediately. She can then deploy a targeted, localized technical update across all her APAC nodes to address the concern before it turns into a PR crisis. This requires a mastery of natural language processing or NLP tools that can detect sarcasm, regional idioms, and technical jargon across different cultures. Another critical element is the mastery of regional platform dominance. While the US is dominated by platforms like LinkedIn, X, and Instagram, the 2026 global landscape is much more diverse. Taylor must be proficient in the technical requirements of platforms like WeChat in China, Line in Japan, and the emerging decentralized protocols that are gaining traction in Europe. Each of these platforms has its own unique API, its own rules for organic reach, and its own user behavior patterns. For instance, online, the use of branded sticker packs is a primary driver of organic brand awareness in the tech sector. Taylor must coordinate with the design team to create high-utility, technically themed stickers that Japanese developers actually want to use in their private chats. This is a level of platform-specific creativity that goes far beyond standard post scheduling. Furthermore, Taylor must navigate the 2026 cross-border data regulations. As a specialist for a US tech firm, she is responsible for ensuring that the data collected through social media interactions in the EU is stored and processed according to the latest 2027 Ready compliance standards. This is not just a job for the legal team, it is a social media skill. She must know how to set up region-locked lead generation forms and how to manage the right-to-be-forgotten requests that come in via social direct messages. If Taylor gets this wrong, the company faces fines that can reach 4% of global turnover. Potential outcomes of a compliance-first social strategy include higher trust scores with international enterprise clients and a smoother path to global market dominance. This deep dive into global scaling reveals a role that is increasingly complex. You are a diplomat, a technologist, and a cultural anthropologist all at once. You are managing a global narrative that must remain consistent at its core, while being infinitely adaptable at its edges. It is a high-wire act of brand integrity versus regional relevance. But even with a perfectly localized global engine, there is one final frontier that is currently separating the specialists from the architects in 2026. It is the ability to bridge the gap between the digital world and the emerging physical-digital hybrid spaces. As US tech moves into the era of spatial computing and the industrial metaverse, social media is moving off the screen and into the environment around us. In the next part, we are going to explore the skill of spatial social architecture. We will look at how to design social experiences for augmented reality headsets and the specific technical requirements for creating persistent digital brand assets in the real world. We will dive into the data on how US consumers are interacting with spatial content and the new set of metrics you will need to track when a user walks through your brand's social post instead of scrolling past it. If you think vertical video is the final form of social media, you are about to see how the third dimension is changing everything. To master the 2026 US tech landscape, you must accept that the screen is no longer the boundary of the social experience. We are entering the era of spatial social architecture, or SSA. This is not about the failed metaverse hype of the early 2020s. It is about the seamless integration of digital social layers onto the physical world through high-fidelity augmented reality and spatial computing. Imagine a specialist named Riley working for a premier robotics and automation firm in Boston. In 2026, Riley's primary objective for a new product launch is not just a viral video on a mobile device. Instead, she is responsible for deploying persistent digital brand assets that exist in three-dimensional space at key tech hubs across the United States, from Kendall Square to Silicon Beach. The first skill you must possess is volumetric content literacy. In the past, you were concerned with aspect ratios and frame rates. In 2026, you are concerned with USDZ and GLB file formats, spatial triggers, and occlusion. A social media specialist in the tech sector must now understand how a 3D model of a new server rack or a surgical robot will interact with the user's physical environment. Step by step, this involves working with 3D designers to ensure that your social assets are optimized for spatial platforms like the Apple Vision Pro and Meta's latest lightweight AR glasses. You are not just a curator of images, you are an architect of environments. For instance, Riley creates a spatial social post that allows an enterprise buyer in Chicago to place a full-scale, interactive 3D twin of a robotics assembly line directly on their office floor. The buyer can walk around it, expand specific components to see the technical specs, and see real-time social comments from other engineers floating as spatial annotations around the machine. Furthermore, we must address the integration of the industrial metaverse into B2B social strategy. This is a sector where the US tech industry is seeing massive historical growth. Companies are using social platforms to showcase digital twins of their factories and supply chains. A specialist in this space needs to understand how to tell a story through a digital twin. Imagine if Riley produces a social experience where users can virtually walk through a high-security data center in Northern Virginia that doesn't officially allow visitors. Through a series of spatial social posts, she can demonstrate the cooling efficiency and security protocols of the facility in an immersive way. This requires a technical understanding of how to link real-time IoT data from the physical facility to the digital social asset, providing the audience with a live view of the company's operational excellence. Step by step, the transition to spatial involves a new content production workflow. First, you identify the spatial hook, the element of your product that benefits most from being seen in 3D. Second, you develop the spatial script, which must account for the user's movement and the potential for a 360-degree perspective. Third, you coordinate the technical deployment, ensuring the assets are light enough to load instantly over 5G and 6G networks but dense enough to look realistic. Finally, you manage the spatial community, which involves moderating the digital annotations and comments that users leave in physical spaces. Case studies from early 2026 tech launches indicate that brands that failed to moderate their physical location anchors faced digital graffiti, where competitors or disgruntled users pinned negative reviews directly onto the brand's physical headquarters. We also have to consider the ethics of spatial data collection. In the US, the 2026 privacy landscape is increasingly focused on biometric privacy. When you track a user's gaze or their physical movement around a digital asset, you are collecting highly sensitive information. A top-tier social media specialist must be an expert in consent-based spatial marketing. This involves designing the user interface so that the value exchange is clear. The user grants access to their spatial data in exchange for a highly personalized, high-utility technical demonstration. You must work closely with the legal and cybersecurity teams to ensure this data is encrypted and handled according to the latest US federal guidelines. If you mismanage this, you don't just lose a follower. You risk a major civil rights litigation in the digital space. Consider a scenario where Riley is managing the spatial social presence for a new aerospace startup. She creates an AR experience where potential investors can see a 1:1 scale model of a new propulsion system floating over the Potomac River in Washington, D.C. As they interact with the model, the system tracks which technical specifications they spend the most time reading. Riley then uses this data to prepare a personalized follow-up for the sales team, focusing precisely on the areas where the investors showed the most interest. This is the ultimate form of social-to-sales engineering, where the physical world becomes the lead generation environment. The depth of the spatial specialist role requires a fusion of the skills we have discussed in the previous parts: technical vocabulary, neurocopywriting, data architecture, and executive branding, all projected into a three-dimensional environment. You are no longer just managing a page, you are managing a reality. You are the curator of the digital layer that will soon sit on top of every major city and tech campus in the United States. But as we stand on the brink of this spatial revolution, there is one final essential piece of the puzzle. All of these technical skills, from attribution modeling to spatial architecture, must be organized into a cohesive career roadmap. How do you actually get the job? How do you negotiate the high-tier salaries that these skills command in Silicon Valley and beyond? And most importantly, how do you stay ahead of the next wave of disruption that is already forming for 2027 and 2028? In the final part of this masterclass, we are going to build your 2026 to 2030 career fortress. We will look at the exact salary benchmarks for these high-level specialist roles and the specific interview frameworks used by Google, Meta, and OpenAI to vet their social architects. We will reveal the portfolio of the future, a digital asset that looks nothing like a traditional resume. We are ending this series by giving you the keys to the kingdom, ensuring that you aren't just a participant in the US tech industry, but a leader who defines its future. Building your 2026 career fortress starts with the total destruction of the traditional resume. In the high-stakes environment of the US tech industry, a PDF document listing your responsibilities is no longer a competitive asset. It is a liability that signals you are stuck in the 2022 marketing era. Imagine a specialist named Casey applying for a principal social architect position at a leading AI chip manufacturer in Santa Clara. Casey does not send a file. Casey sends a link to a living portfolio. This is a dynamic high-security dashboard that serves as a proof-of-work engine. The first section of Casey's portfolio is a real-time attribution showcase. Using integrated APIs, Casey displays a sanitized, non-proprietary version of the conversion deltas achieved in previous roles. It shows exactly how a series of technical deep dives on Farcaster led to a measurable 15% increase in enterprise lead velocity over a 6-month period. To build this yourself, you must move beyond claiming you managed a budget. You must demonstrate how you optimize that budget using SQL-backed reporting and automated signal management. Step by step, your living portfolio must include 3 distinct layers of evidence. The first layer is the strategy to scale retrospective. This is a deep dive into a single campaign where you detail the initial hypothesis, the A/B test variables, the mid-campaign pivots based on real-time sentiment data, and the final ROI. The second layer is the technical stack proficiency. In 2026, this isn't a list of logos like Google Analytics or Sprout Social. It is a series of screen recordings showing you navigating a Snowflake database, writing a Python script to automate sentiment alerts, or configuring a server-side conversions API. The third layer is voice synthesis proof. You must show examples of how you took a CEO's raw technical input and transformed it into a high-engagement executive personal brand series without losing the technical authority. Historical trends show that candidates who provide this level of transparent, technical proof have a 300% higher probability of bypassing the initial AI screening filters used by US tech giants. Once you have secured the interview, you enter the gauntlet. At firms like Meta, Google, or OpenAI in 2026, the interview process for a social media specialist has evolved into a high-pressure technical simulation. You will be faced with the whiteboard social strategy session. Imagine sitting in a glass-walled room in Menlo Park. The interviewer presents a crisis scenario. A major security vulnerability has just been discovered in your company's flagship API, and the news is breaking on Reddit before the official PR statement is ready. You have 10 minutes to map out the cross-platform response. You must use the STAR+D method: situation, task, action, result, and most importantly, data. You don't just say you would post an update. You explain how you would deploy a localized response matrix across decentralized nodes, which sentiment triggers would activate a CEO video response, and how you would use dark social tracking to see if the technical community's trust is recovering in private Slack channels. You must be prepared to answer highly specific technical questions, such as how you would mitigate the impact of the 2027 privacy rollout on your current retargeting loops. Let's talk about the economics of your career. Based on historical trends in major US tech hubs like San Francisco, Austin, New York City, and Seattle, the compensation structure for a social media specialist in 2026 has shifted significantly toward total compensation, or TC. A mid-level specialist can expect a base salary ranging from $120,000 to $160,000. However, the real value lies in the restricted stock units, or RSUs, and the performance bonuses. In a high-growth tech firm, your TC can easily exceed $220,000 if your social strategies are directly tied to revenue growth. During the negotiation phase, you must use your data-backed portfolio as leverage. You are not negotiating for a marketing job. You are negotiating for a revenue-driving technical role. If the company offers a lower base, you negotiate for a higher equity stake tied to specific performance milestones, such as a 20% increase in first-party data collection through social channels. This level of financial literacy is what allows the top 1% of specialists to build long-term wealth within the tech sector. As you scale your career, you must also master the art of networking within the dark social economy. In the US tech world, the best roles are often never posted on public job boards. They are filled through high-trust referrals in private Discord servers, exclusive Telegram groups, and gated developer communities. To gain access to these circles, you must become a contributor before you become a seeker. This involves sharing high-value technical insights, helping others solve complex attribution problems, and positioning yourself as a peer to the engineers and product leads who will eventually be your hiring managers. Imagine if Casey, our specialist in Santa Clara, spent 2 years answering technical questions on a private DevOps Slack channel. When the head of growth at a major startup needs a new social architect, Casey is the first person they think of. This is the invisible resume that carries more weight than any LinkedIn profile ever could. Looking toward 2027 and 2028, the next major disruption you must prepare for is the rise of agentic social management. This is the transition from you using AI tools to you managing a fleet of autonomous AI agents that handle the day-to-day execution of your strategy. Your role will shift from a creator to a system designer. You will be responsible for training these agents on the brand's unique technical voice, setting the ethical guardrails for their interactions, and auditing their performance against complex attribution models. The specialists who fail to understand the underlying architecture of these agents will find themselves replaced by those who can build and manage them. You must stay ahead of the curve by experimenting with open-source models and staying deeply embedded in the research coming out of the AI labs in Silicon Valley. To maintain your career fortress, you must also become a steward of ethical data management. As U.S. federal regulations around digital privacy and algorithmic transparency tighten, the social media specialist will increasingly take on a role similar to a compliance officer. You must be able to explain to your audience exactly how their data is being used and ensure that your automated systems are free from bias. Case studies from 2025 show that brands that prioritize ethical transparency in their social interactions saw a 25% higher long-term customer retention rate compared to those that relied on aggressive, opaque tracking. Your career longevity depends on your ability to build trust in an era of deepfakes and data breaches. You have now completed the Deep Dive Masterclass on becoming a social media specialist in the US tech industry. We have covered everything from the technical stack in neurocopywriting to global scaling and spatial architecture. You possess the roadmap to transition from a casual content creator to a high-impact revenue architect. The U.S. tech industry is a meritocracy of data and innovation. If you can prove your value through technical mastery and strategic depth, the potential outcomes for your career are limitless. You are no longer watching the digital revolution from the sidelines. You have the tools to be the one who directs it. But even with this comprehensive knowledge, there is one final variable that no masterclass can fully prepare you for. It is the algorithmic black swan, the sudden, unpredictable shift in the digital landscape that can render today's tools obsolete overnight. Throughout this series, we have looked at the systems we can control, but the true leaders of 2027 will be defined by how they react to the systems they cannot. The question isn't just whether you can master the algorithm of today, but whether you can survive the total collapse of the platforms we currently call home. In our next series, we are going to explore the post-platform era, a world where the traditional social feed has vanished and the entire internet has become a decentralized, peer-to-peer social layer. If you thought the shift to 2026 was intense, you aren't ready for what happens when the very concept of a social media company disappears. Are you prepared to be a specialist in a world without platforms?